Hello again, everyone. This is week 6 of our MPA 510 History and Theory of Public Administration course. This is my multimedia presentation based off of the hypothetical question that our boss would pose to us. We need to run our government agency more like the private sector. So first, I would need to get some questions answered and kind of prompt them to see what started this question in general for them. In what way do we need to be more like the private sector? What aspects are we going to be looking at? For what purpose? What is the reason that we would be doing this? And with what outcome? What is the goal? What kind of started this conversation in the first place? So this is not all of the roles of the government, but kind of looking at a big picture theoretical framework for how we would respond to this question. The government is responsible for using efficient resources, so efficient uses of the resources that they have. So this is a Leonard White theory. And so in answering this question, when we think of public, we think of I think of Google and, a slide down the stairs instead of, a mechanism to get to the first floor, and mixers with cocktails and, big functions and take everyone on a yacht. So what exactly are we going to be looking at in the public sector, and does it align with efficient use of community resources? And then we need to express the will of the people. This was a Merton theory. And so is this want coming from something that just your boss wants, or is this something that we have heard and gotten from community surveys, employee surveys, which would then better the employee workforce morale so that they could provide better services to the citizens. So does this align with expressing the will of the people for whatever government agency we're working for in this hypothetical situation? And the government agency should be simply structured and easy to understand. Is whatever we're going to be presenting going to be easily digestible to the community and the public at large? Is it going to complicate our structure in any way? Would it align with this theory that Grodson gave us in the American system? And would it complicate something to a way that it would convolute how we interact with other government agencies? If we're a city, is this going to complicate how we function with the county, with the state, with the federal? And so kind of tying in that concept we've learned from Wright this week of intergovernmental relations. And administration as politically neutral. This is something we hear from David Rosenblum, that public administrators should be politically neutral when they're making decisions. So with our boss presenting this idea, is this being driven by something that they want? What is the motive? And is it something that's going to help the greater good for the community, for the public, or is it just being motivated by selfish terms? So let's compare some of the differences between the private and public sector and how we would be making these decisions. While some unimportant aspects, as Graham Allison talked about, are comparatively similar, how we function is fundamentally different. So in the private sector, you have flexibility in making decisions, or in the public, decisions are based off of guided rules and regulations. The civil service laws, whatever your personnel rules, a municipal code, there's different regulations that would have to be taken into account, and that factor is huge when you're going to be making a decision. In private, the person who's in charge typically has decision-making power that does not take into account other factors or people, whereas in the public sector, you've got to get buy-in from the public, from your unions, from political groups, etc. It's a long process. Typically, when a policy or a change is, going to be taking place, at least presented to, let's say, a city council for a vote, you would go to the unions and you would talk to them and talk about the impact that it would have. You would have a public hearing before the actual presentation goes to council for a voting. And so you'd have to take a lot of different factors into consideration. And the time perspective, I think private companies have a little more flexibility to make changes for in the now action. I'm sure that they were able to make a lot of initial very prompt changes for the pandemic, challenges that we experienced, where the time perspective is driven by political climate in the public. So then what do we tell our boss? Does this align with our role and parameters as a government agency for whatever government agency we're working with? Is this a tactic that's being driven by political pressure, or is it just something that one individual wants? Is this trying to solve, a wicked problem that's not going to get us anywhere and just complicate something? Can we do whatever the person is suggesting within the parameters of our specific agency rules? Is this something that's even feasible? And is it the right time to push for it? Political climate is something that does affect how, legislation or policies or any type of changes are made. So would this be the right time to make this suggestion? So thank you very much for listening to another one of my presentations, and I hope everybody has a great rest of their week.